Hello, how are you guys? I'm coming on this channel after a very long time. Today I'm going to talk about a question someone has asked me, which is he has asked me to talk a bit about the cost of living in Europe. I've lived in two countries in Europe, in UK and in the Netherlands, so I can only talk about these two countries. I can't talk about, let's say, living cost in Norway or Denmark or Sweden or in Switzerland or Luxembourg. I don't know much about living cost in those countries, but I can safely tell you that it's not too different in those countries, and it will be somewhere near these two countries. So if you can, if you really want to know the average cost of living in Europe, in major cities, it would be more or less the same. London is an exception. I would say even Switzerland is also an exception to that. But other than that, I think most other cities, big cities in Europe, the cost of living is more or less the same. I mean, not too different. Let me start with the housing, which is perhaps the biggest expense that you will have when you live in Europe. In London, a studio apartment will cost you anywhere between 1,000 to 1,500 pound. But if you want to rent a one bedroom apartment, it would cost at least 1,500, even in some cases 2,000 pound. Also depends which part of London. If you live in the outskirts, it will be cheaper, around 1,500 pound. But if you live in more central London, it will be like 2,000 pound, even higher for just one bedroom apartment. Right? Imagine how expensive it is to live in London. Right? In Amsterdam, it's also quite expensive to find an apartment. The difference between Amsterdam and London is that in London, at least, you have many options to explore, whereas in Amsterdam, there's simply not many one bedroom apartments. In Netherlands, I would say even many parts of Europe, there's you won't find many one bedroom apartments or studio apartments. Most of the apartments for rent, available for rent, are two bedroom, three bedroom apartments. For people who cannot afford a two bedroom, three bedroom apartment, there is a huge competition for the studio apartments, one bedroom apartments. So even though the price may not be as high as in London, a studio apartment in Amsterdam would cost you anywhere around 1,000 euro to 1,500 euro, and a one bedroom apartment would cost you anywhere between 1,600 euro or 1,700 euro to 2,000 euro. But then it's difficult to get. Even if you are willing to pay that kind of money, there is no guarantee that you will get those places. So, but the good thing with the Netherlands is that because the public transport is quite good, and because Amsterdam is a much smaller city compared to that of London, you can stay in a different city and then travel to Amsterdam. That's quite possible, and then that way you will find the living cost to be much less. You can in the nearby cities, you can easily rent an apartment, like a one bedroom apartment or two bedroom apartment, even within 1,500 1,600 euro. So that's quite possible, and that makes the cost of living less, right? Other than living cost, there are many other things also that contribute towards the overall cost of living. One is the transportation, public transportation. In London, it's quite expensive. I would say even in Netherlands, it's super expensive. Intercity transportation is super expensive in all of the cities in Europe. That's something. But you have the options. Like if you work for companies, they sometimes provide the public transportation. So they provide you, especially in Netherlands, they provide you with a public transport card, which you can use for commute. Something I haven't experienced in London, though, that not many companies provide such facilities. The and other than that, you have the insurance, right? Health insurance. there's a perception that in UK it's free because NHS and it's a public healthcare here in UK, so it's free of cost, but that's actually not true. You pay money on yearly basis. So if you get a visa, there's something called IHS fee, and you have to pay that for that. Sometimes your employer will pay for that, so you don't have to pay anything. So that way it's cheaper. In Netherlands, you have to pay about 150 euro for a basic health insurance, which is not too cheap to be honest. But it covers a number of things. That's one really good thing about it. But in London, companies provide private health insurance as well, next to the NHS, which is the public health care system over there. But you also have the access to the private healthcare. But in Netherlands, you don't have that kind of an option. I think most companies in Netherlands, as far as I know, do not provide private healthcare facilities. So that's the difference between the insurance and healthcare cost. About groceries and food items, I would say London surprisingly a bit cheaper to me compared to what I've experienced in Netherlands. For two people, uh, in London you probably have to spend about 200 pound or 250 pound, maximum 300 pound for your groceries, whereas in Netherlands it will go well over 400 euros. Okay, so uh, when you do the comparison, pound is actually 20% on average more valued more compared to the euros. So 1 pound is about 1.2 euros. So use that for the comparison. So Netherlands, for groceries and eating out, I would say it's quite expensive. London is quite expensive even for eating out. But let me tell you that other parts of UK is much cheaper than London. So I've lived also in other cities in UK. The living cost there is also much cheaper than in London. In Manchester, where I've lived, you can get a one bedroom apartment for less than £1,000. It's quite possible. In nearby towns near Manchester in UK, you can rent an apartment, 1 BHK or 2 BHK even, for £600 or £700. I have seen people doing that. I myself was living in a one bedroom apartment, which was used to cost me about 500, £550. Right, that's quite possible, right? And commute cost again is much cheaper outside of London in the UK, so there also you save quite a bit of money. In Netherlands, on the other hand, the living cost doesn't change drastically in other cities other than the capital city, which is Amsterdam. So the living cost in other cities in Netherlands is less compared to that in Amsterdam, but it's not too different, I would say. Difference probably is about 20% maximum, whereas in UK, the London and other cities in UK, the living cost difference would be easily 32, 30, 40, even 40%. The difference would be that kind of a number. Okay, what else? Eating out, or things. I mean, all outdoor activities are super expensive in London, but also in all of the cities in Netherlands. If you want to eat out in a nice restaurant in Netherlands, it's super expensive. I would say I mean, for one person it would be around 40-50 euro in a decent restaurant, even higher I would say. In London it's even more expensive. But if you go outside of London, if you go to Birmingham or Manchester or Leeds, in those places, the eating out expense is, I think, 50%, even more cheaper. So that's the difference between London and outside of London in the UK. So if you are planning to live outside of London in UK, you will save a lot of money. Whereas in Netherlands, the difference is a bit less between Amsterdam and outside of Amsterdam. Other cities in Europe, whether it's Paris or Berlin or Frankfurt, the living expenses are very similar to that of Amsterdam. So I don't see much of a big difference. London is an outlier, especially for housing cost. it's an outlier, right? Surprisingly, the groceries are cheaper in London, to my big surprise, I would say. But everything else is quite expensive. But London is a very big city, so you don't live in those 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom apartments over there. You can easily find a studio apartment to live there. Whereas in other parts of Europe, you live in a bigger space, right? So for bachelor, the difference is not too big, but if you have a family, we have kids, the difference becomes very big. In terms of education, if you want to give education to your kids, it's free in Netherlands, also free in the UK. You don't pay anything directly, I would say. Obviously you pay through the taxes, but it's yeah, if you want to send your kids to private schools, I would say it's equally expensive in both countries. uh, right, in UK many people don't have to send their kids to private schools, simply because the public education is good, but also it's in English. For expats, that's quite important. In Netherlands, it's not in English, it's in Dutch. So many experts want to send their kids to English schools, so they prefer private schools, and so these are quite expensive. I mean, for 1 year it could be like 15,000 euro per year per child, and that is quite expensive in my view, right? Taxes are also much higher in Netherlands compared to that in UK. So that's something you have to take into account. But the social security benefits are actually built better in Netherlands compared to that in the UK. So these are things you need to take into account if you want to move to Europe. But let me also tell you that other countries, the Western European countries, the cost of living is very similar to that of Netherlands. Germany is a bit cheaper, Paris, France, similar level. Always you will find that there is a bit of a difference in the cost of living between living in a big cities like Frankfurt or Berlin or Paris to the other smaller city. Transportation is quite good in Europe. So you can live in a small town and you can commute to a large city, and that way you can save a lot of money. And after COVID, now you have the facility of working from home. That really helps to save a bit of money on commute, but also on the rent, because now you can live outside of the city and commute on a once in a while to the office. So that way you save a bit of money on the rent. These are things I wanted to discuss. If you have any questions, let me know in the comment section.